First thing I noticed was that the Arrowhaven's crew stopped talking. Not the hush that falls when a captain enters a room. Something slower, deliberate. One by one, the officers at their stations settled their hands and went still. Lieutenant Yeva, who had been running a calibration loop on the secondary array for the better part of an hour, closed the routine and folded her arms. The helmsman straightened in his seat. Nobody announced anything. Nobody had to. I was the only civilian aboard the escort frigate, trade attaché 6 weeks into my first deep space posting, and I did not know yet what that particular stillness meant. I know now. It means that something is on the scope that changes the math, and everyone in the room understands it except you. The Verith Combine inspection fleet had appeared off the port bow of our merchant column 40 minutes earlier. 11 vessels, 3 heavy frigates in a forward wedge, 6 mid-tonnage inspection cruisers in lateral echelon, and 2 larger command flagships trailing at distance, their hull markings the deep amber and black of the Combine's 3rd Levy Division, standard formation for a column interdiction. They had done this in the Hevat Reach for 60 years, moved to intercept, broadcast their levy authority on the standard trade channels, and waited for the lead merchant to acknowledge. Most did. The Reach was their corridor, or had been, and the toll was cheaper than the alternative. Captain Reese had taken the hail and replied crisply that the column was registered under Terran convoy protocols and was transiting under escort. I watched the Combine's response scroll across the communications panel. Their senior levy master, a Verith officer, named something that translated roughly as second voice of the 4th caste, informed us that Terran convoy protocols carried no standing in the Hevat Reach, and that we would heave to once for inspection within the hour or face seizure. His tone was not hostile, it was administrative. He had said those words, or a version of them, hundreds of times. He expected the math to close the way it always closed. Captain Reese acknowledged the transmission, set the channel to hold, and said nothing further. That was when the crew went quiet. "What's our escort configuration?" I asked the lieutenant. I was not supposed to ask operational questions. She answered anyway. Arrowhaven and one other. The Tallow Point? That was the 2nd frigate I had seen on the manifest. A mid-class patrol. Vessel, older hull. Arrowhaven and one other, she said again. And her voice was exactly level, and she did not look at me. The Combine's forward wedge began its approach at the 20-minute mark. Not fast, a deliberate, unhurried closing speed that communicated certainty rather than aggression. They had mass, they had the corridor, and they had done this 1,000 times. 2 of the merchant captains in the column were already broadcasting low-grade distress flags, the kind that don't call for rescue so much as register discomfort for the record. The 3rd merchant, a bulk ore hauler named the Dressler's Claim, had gone completely silent and was running a holding pattern. I could not tell if that was panic or instruction. The Combine's lead frigate crossed the outer marker buoys of our declared column boundary at 31 minutes. That boundary is a legal designation, physical barrier, a formal declaration of the space a registered convoy occupies in transit. Crossing it is an act. Not an act of war, not under most conventions, but an act. A statement that the party crossing it does not recognize the convention in question. I felt the deck hum change. It was subtle, not an engine surge, not acceleration. A kind of resonance deep in the bones of the ship, like something very large had just done something very quiet. On the main scope, at the edge of the display, a new contact resolved. It did not arrive. That is the only word I have for what happened. It did not travel into view, did not decelerate into position. One moment there was a region of the scope showing the standard asteroid debris of the Reach, the drifting rock scatter that makes the corridor useful as cover. And then that region showed a ship. A ship that had been there for some time. A ship that had simply chosen at this exact moment to be visible. The Verity-9 was a carrier, not a frigate, not a destroyer. A carrier, Hestron-class fleet carrier, and it sat between our column and the Combine's forward wedge at a distance of 4,000 kilometers and did not move. Its hull was enormous by any measure I had trained to read on a scope. Not the longest class in Terran service, but wide-beamed and deep-drafted. Its dorsal launch bays extending in 2 long rows, like the spine of something that had grown into its purpose over decades. The hull was weathered, scored in places. The armor plating around the forward batteries showed the kind of discoloration that only comes, repeated heat cycling, from use. This was not a ship that had been sent to make a point. It had been positioned there, without fanfare, without announcement, and it had waited. It was not pointing weapons at anyone. Nothing was mod-powered firing configuration. No active targeting arrays. I confirmed that by watching Yeva's panel, because she would have said something if there had been. The Verity-9 simply held position. The Combine's forward wedge stopped. Not a tactical halt. Not the kind of formation pause you execute when you're recalculating an approach vector. They stopped the way a person stops when they open a door expecting a corridor and find instead that the corridor is not there. The three leading frigates bled speed simultaneously, their closing vector dissolving into a near-static drift. 11 seconds. I counted them. Nobody transmitted anything on any channel. On the scope, I watched the 6 inspection cruisers in lateral echelon begin a slow drift. Not a retreat, no acceleration, no course change logged, just a drift. The way a formation moves when nobody has issued a withdrawal order, but every ship in it has quietly added a few meters per second of lateral velocity, and nobody is going to note that in the log either. The 2 flagships at the rear did not move. They held, and the Verity-9 held, and there was a long moment where those 4 vessels simply regarded one another across 4,000 kilometers of asteroid, scattered dark, and I understood, with the certainty of someone watching a force calculation complete itself in real time, that the second voice of the fourth cast had arrived at an answer. Then he sent a single-line communication to the Arrowhaven. Captain Reese read it. She did not share it immediately. She read it twice, set it aside, and asked the helmsman to confirm our transit heading. He did. She authorized the merchant column to proceed on course. It was only later, when the Reach was behind us and the Verity-9 had returned to whatever it was doing when it wasn't being visible, that Reese showed me the Combine's final transmission. It said, "We are recalibrating our assessment of this corridor." That was all. No formal withdrawal of the levy claim, no acknowledgement of the carrier, no reference to the incident. 7 words of bureaucratic language that meant, in the grammar of the Verith Combine's caste hierarchy, something very close to, "We will not be discussing what we just saw." I asked Captain Reese how long the Verity-9 had been there. She considered the question with the careful patience of someone who has learned to parse what a civilian is really asking. It was positioned before we entered the Reach, she said. Standard escort protocol for high-value convoys in disputed corridors. Standard, I said. There are a few of them, she said, in the Reaches. In the corridors the Combine uses. In a couple of corridors the Combine doesn't know we've charted. She paused. They're not there to fight. If we wanted to fight, this would have gone differently. They're there because the calculation works better when the other side has accurate information. I thought about the second voice of the fourth cast, on his flagship at the back of 11 ships, watching a carrier materialize out of asteroid debris that his survey teams had certainly scanned before he moved to intercept. I thought about what his instruments told him, not a threat posture, not a weapons lock. Just a ship holding position, waiting to be seen, and then being seen. The math had changed in 11 seconds and he had understood, with the precision of someone trained from birth to read force calculations, exactly what it meant. He had not called it a defeat. He had called it a recalibration. The merchant column arrived at Hevet Station 4 days later. I filed my attaché report and noted that transit through the Reach had proceeded without incident. That was accurate. Nothing had fired. Nobody had died. The Combine had not retreated. They had recalibrated, and there is a difference, though it is a difference that matters more to them than to us. The Verity-9's presence never appeared in any official record of that transit. Not in the convoy log, not in Combine communications, not in the station's arrival manifest. As far as the corridor's documented history was concerned, the Arrowhaven had escorted a merchant column through the Hevet Reach, and the Combine had elected not to intercept. I've been told the Combine restructured its levy doctrine for the Reach within the year, narrower claim boundaries, shorter intercept windows, a general de-escalation of what had been for 6 decades one of their most productive corridors. Nobody announced that either. Some things don't need an announcement. They just need to hold position and wait to be seen, and let the math do what math does.